Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the place that BP call home, Silverstone. This former RAF airbase, now home to the British Grand Prix, and it is home of round 3 of this D1 World Championship, where OliX is looking to make it 3 wins in a row for Mercedes and extend his championship lead. We're here on the outskirts here of Northamptonshire at the magnificent Silverstone circuit with 18 corners. Here are your active aero zones, as well as your overtake detection at the Vale chicane. A lot of elevation change heading up into Village before descending very rapidly down the hangar straight with a very anticipated crowd here. Here's your starting grid then for today's race. It is Marco who lines up on pole position with OliX in P2, so Ferrari with the upper hand here today. We're moments away now from the lights from heading out, but before we start, we've got to say, Robin in that Cadillac did one hell of a job there. Somehow managing to qualify in P8 in arguably the slowest car. So that is one massive feat there from the driver. And with that, let's head trackside for commentary.
Smeggy speed on component 1 after using Spotify indeed. There's 5 lights on. And it's put to the floor. We go racing here at Silverstone. Marco gets a decent start. No, OliX jumps him immediately up the inside. As there's a Red Bull there cutting the inside. I tell you, there's a crash at the back there. I think Pingu's been tagged by slightly tilted at the back. That could be an intervention if possible. We've got the other Cadillac in the middle of the track. And we now have, I believe, a virtual safety car on track. As Robin was tagged into Village Corner. And Pingu was absolutely murdered at the first corner by the Alpine driver. It's a disaster for both the Cadillacs as Marco loses a position to OliX and Edward lost a position to Gibbo. Do either of the Cadillacs have damage? Pingu doesn't have a front wing. Tilted's missing an end plate. But Robin seems to be okay. He doesn't seem to have any visible damage, but I want to know who tagged him.
Right, let's get a replay of that start. So we're on board now with Tilted, heading down into the first corner, and Pingu, I think he just arrives out of nowhere. That's hard to judge on that one. As we then look at the start of Robin, who gets a decent launch. He's not been jumped by anyone. He's maintaining his line, maintaining position. He's going alongside pulled over here. They arrive into turn 3 and he gets a tag from behind. It's difficult to tell though who that was from this angle. So we're going to get another view here on board with ZX. We're looking up front here to the Cadillac. And I believe David Svat has just tagged the back of Robin. So that's on David Svat for that second Cadillac incident.
As we are now resuming racing once again, Edward immediately to the inside of Gibbo. It's just not quite close enough as we head now down into Vale. Now we're surely going to have an overtake here at the back as ZX looks up the inside of the steps. These two have history from last week, and ZX makes our clean move round the outside as I believe Steph spun or maybe got tagged. I'm not entirely sure, but there was definitely the Aston spinning round. Tilted's coming in, I believe Pingu are coming in as well to retire. ZX goes up the inside there of Baban. He's not quite finished it off yet though, so we're going to hop on board with him, and now he gets ahead of the Audi. Using the overtake mode, he clears him, going down onto the Wellington straight.
Right, so we've got a replay here of Steps with his spin. So into the Vale chicane, ZX up the inside. Steps on his inside. Oh dear, they've made contact again.
And the race has most certainly calmed down as there goes Tig on ZX. Most certainly Smeggy will want to be following him through. Is he going to ride with the Haas? And look behind to see Smeggy getting a really good run there through Farm. And he's just driven past ZX like he's not even present. That's a flyby overtake, we'll call that, from Smeggy, but it's alright, gain him up in position, he's up to P14. Through the loop they go. Paul Diver's right behind, no, that's Tig behind them. looking at this thing going, I want a piece of this. As he he's really close. It's round the outside goes David Svat on the Williams. And Tig is going to drive up the inside through Luffield. Is he able to complete the move? We'll watch it here. And he does get ahead of the Williams. Shaz is passed by 2 people in 2 corners. David Svat deactivating his active aero momentarily. I wonder if he almost ran into the back of Tsunami. As David Svat almost getting hit there going into Maggots and Beckett. He has such a good run on the Alpine, and I wonder if the Alpine's running a little bit low on ERS. He's running a lot lower than what David Svat is, but he's got the gap, I think, to stay ahead. As Tig to the inside there of Stowe. And Tig is up now into P7, but I'm sure Tsunami is not going to fight this one too hard. Tilted retires on the hangar straight, no, the Wellington straight, sorry. So he's retired on track, not in the pits. That could be a penalty coming for him. I think Shaz goes a little bit deep, going into the final corner. That's what you see here. Marco and Edward swap positions, going into Maggots. Oh, wish I'd seen that one live. OliX really been caught up here. We've got a Snake and David Svat swapping, but we're watching this fight for the lead at the race. Edward has to go defensive on the inside. The Stowe corner, but he's far enough ahead. I just want to compare these two to the ERS. OliX has a lot less battery than his teammate. I wonder if Edward's going to try and send it on this lap. He's got overtake mode, but OliX, obviously with boost, can still defend his position rather well. But if they keep fighting like that, that's going to bring Pimaralda and Gibbo back into this fight, and you could straight up have a Williams fighting for a podium place here in D1. No team orders at Merck? Well, I figured that was the case because there have been no team orders so far, and I think you wouldn't just be telling me that in my chat for a reason. I figured there were no team orders. As OliX just cleared it, but he's not got that much battery. Yeah, he's got 20%. And Edward has 80. So unless OliX has some magic tire like battery saving going out of cops, Edward could be about to take the lead here of his home Grand Prix. Because I believe he's British. OliX looking a little wide there through cops, really using all of the track. Both are British. I thought they were. So yeah, they both want to win their home race, and you just got Marco who's just like, I want this win. I need this win. So we're going to ride with OliX. He's got nothing left to deploy. And Edward choosing not to fight. He could have easily made the move there. He had 40% more battery than his teammate, but he's going to wait for it. Into Vale. Edward up the inside, and he gets ahead of OliX. That could open the door now for Marco, because OliX didn't even have the greatest of exits. And Marco is right there. We've got a spinner at the back. I think that's Pingu. Coming out. Is he just... No, that's not Pingu. Oh, it's Saharik. That's not Pingu, it's Saharik. Okay, my bad. Sorry, Pingu, if you're watching this. I'll have to wait and see that. Pimaralda is very close again to the back of Aaron Gibbo. You can just see them in the background there. Like, he's actually going to try and go for it into Abbey corner. Pimaralda up the inside, going into turn 1. And he's... Oh no, he's gone round. He saves that and somehow stops that Williams going into the barriers. That's a cat-like reflex there from David to keep his race going, and he's still P5. But that has cost him P4. It was a mighty overtake there. It was very ambitious. And that was definitely a good catch from the Williams driver, although his tyres will not be thanking him for that, and I would assume he would be in the pits at the end of this lap. Robin and Ibrahim are also next to get rid of those medium compounds. Compared to the guys he's fighting, as Marco gets a really good exit out of cops, using a little bit of overtake, clearly, to try and gain as close as he can. And is he going to go for it into Stowe corner? OliX, I believe, is running on fumes because Marco is coming. And he's ahead of OliX. Marco regains the lead after losing it on the first lap. And is anyone going to come into the pits? OliX into the pits now. He's going for the undercut now on Marco, clearly. He's had enough of those mediums, and that's going to undercut him for sure. But also, it could also be cover off Edward, who surely is going to catch up massively, as Edward is massively caught up to the back of Baban. When you consider how far Edward came out behind this Audi to how close he is now after one lap, kind of shows you the difference fresh tyres can make on old ones, and also just the difference in pace in the cars, as Edward is miles clear of OliX. The overcut has worked immensely to the point where he's even going to lose out to Aaron Gibbo, it looks like. Not quite. Gibbo just about comes out behind him, but he's within 2/10 of OliX. The thing is, Gibbo's got the warmed up tyres. He could just make the move instantly. Right on board with him. But OliX clearly burning the extra battery he gained from going into the pits. And OliX seems to be nearly 4 seconds off his teammate. The overcut has worked immensely. It's allowed Edward to gain 3 seconds on his teammate. And if that's the case, OliX is about to gain 3 seconds on Marco with the undercut. As we look further down in the pack here, we see Pulldover looking very close here to Robin. They're actually side by side going into Cobbs. Who's going to break early? It's going to be Pulldover, who's, I don't think, quite got the confidence to go for it into Cobbs, but he's got it here at the exit of Cobbs. Into Maggot. Lovely little move there by Pulldover on the Cadillac. Marco also clears Baban, so he's now also in that straight fight for the podium position. The last time a Red Bull tried fighting for the podium, they disconnected with a few laps to go. Into Stowe they go. Oh, a little bit of contact there with the Haas and the Cadillac. It also looks like Pulldover may have had a little bit of contact too. I believe that one actually is now Pingu, who's just spun exit of Luffield. As Robin gets a 10-second penalty for corner cutting. Now, I did not see what happened there, but I would love to know what happened. As OliX actually loses 2/10 to Edward from the last time I checked, so he's actually being gapped by his teammate. Shaz looking close to the back of Kiki. But Kiki starts to recharge his battery. And Shaz is not close enough to go for the move. You've got to be really close, it seems, around Silverstone to go for an overtake. You've got to be like within 0.3 of a second and have so much more battery than the car in front of you. As OliX and Gibbo running on very similar battery levels, and Marco has gained phenomenally on this lap. He's within a second now, just about, of Aaron Gibbo. There it is now. He's within 9/10 now. There's your race leader. Here's your fight for P2 with OliX, Gibbo and Marco. Pimaralda now clears Baban. If he gets a safety car, this is going to be very smart from Baban to do their strategy. If he doesn't, he's just going to get swallowed up by the pack and is then eventually going to come out where his teammate is, down in P17. Where it's just been action absolutely everywhere you look at the grid. But we've still got 11 laps to go in this race. Anything can and probably will still happen. Because that's just the way this runs, as Marco is very close to the back of Gibbo. He's actually going to go for it into Maggots. Marco's up to P3. Must have caught Gibbo napping a little bit, or maybe just used a little bit more battery. And now he's looking at OliX, who's again running out of battery too early down this back straight. Marco, I think, is sniffing a P2 here. If we're thinking realistic, Marco could still get second place in this race, which would hurt OliX's chances even more if Edward does end up winning this race. Although the gap's now 1.6 seconds. Edward has lost basically 1.3 seconds on that last lap to OliX. So I wonder if there was a mistake. It is most certainly Pingu getting lapped, as Marco very close to the back of OliX, who's, let's just put it that way, he has 10% battery compared to Marco on 60, but they have caught up to Edward now. So I wonder if Edward's slowing down to allow OliX to gain as Pingu has spun again. Smeggy is in P6. Here comes Marco. Up to P2 he goes. Oh, he's staying with him though, OliX, but he's not quite able to get to stay with him. And now Marco is within 6/10 of the race leader. Marco could still win this race. If Marco can unleash the same pace he showed us since swapping to these hard tyres and show us what he did in quali, Marco is still on for the win today, which I'm sure he would very much appreciate. After sitting down in P4 most of this race, after losing the lead, and then being one of the earliest to trigger with the box, but Edward's battery management is very much on par with Marco's. Robin gets he's retired from the race. Robin, he's running in the points and he's retired. So it's not looking good for Cadillac after they both got hit at turn on the first lap. Pingu at turn 1, and then Robin in turn 3 getting spun around. There goes Marco already going into Maggot. Little bit of a wheel tap there from Marco. And he's caught Edward napping the same way he caught Gibbo napping. He's taken the lead of the race. Yeah, side slope. That is now Marco leading this race. And now the question is, can he gap the two Mercedeses, or is the yo-yoing about to commence? We'll have to wait and see there. Coming down into Stowe corner, but he's not deploying anything. He's actually separating the two drivers that started this race in last. That's how much of a good job Pimarauda is doing, as we see to the inside. Pimarauda on Tig. Tig shuts the door on him. But Pimarauda trying an up and under, a little bit of contact coming through Club, and Smeggy finishes him off and puts Pimarauda into the wall of the Exeter Club. Now, I'm not sure if there's going to be damage there to the Williams. But that is the second time this race Pimarauda has gone spinning. The first time by himself, the second time a combination of Tig and Smeggy we've had all race. As Pimarauda is actually making a place on David Sa instead of losing out. I think there was contact. As David Svat lets Pimarauda through, I think David Svat may have spun Pimarauda round again. Oh my god, David Svat was into the back there. I'm sure Pimarauda will want to get ahead of Shaz, who's clearly happy that his teammate is getting completely f***ed over, although his tyres are going to be screaming because of the two spins. It's very twitchy going through farm. So Shaz is clearly burning a little bit more battery, but that's not going to deter David, who's sending one up the inside. The two Williamses side by side through Brooklands. Can David pull it all the way around the outside of left field? Yes, he can. And David pulls off a really good move, but Shaz is still there on his inside into Cobb's corner. Who's going to break the latest? Shaz back down the inside he goes, but I think he may have used a little bit too much battery on that one with Pimarauda. Is a pull diver. A little bit optimistic there and gets ahead of David. Also, OliX is now into second place in this race as we hop back on board with Pimarauda. Paul Diver's run out of battery. Shaz has run out of battery. And into Stowe they go. David's up the inside of Shaz. As they go, oh, they're going to go three. They're going to go nearly 4 wide into the Vale chicane. Paul Diver on the inside of Shaz. Those two made contact. So we've got a 5-car train for PA. This is actually insane as David Svan up the inside of Pimarauda. I can't even keep up with this. Shaz is ahead of Paul Diver. As David Svat is ahead of Paul Diver as well now. I don't know how there was no contact. I thought we were going to get a through goes Hamilton, I'm not going to lie. Oh, David Svat pushing Paul Diver a little bit onto the grass there. A little bit cheeky there from the Racing Bulls. As he's also now going to clear the other Williams as Kiki now making a place also on Paul Diver. These cars separated by absolutely nothing as Shaz just drives into the back of David Svat there, giving him a slightly little tap. As now they head down into Copse Corner again. We've got a yellow flag, that's for a Red Bull, that's Nico, who's just switched onto the soft tyres, who's actually outside of the points, behind steps. As here comes Shaz on David Svat, but he's screwed, I think. I think he screwed himself over because he's got no battery. Yeah, there goes David Svat on Shaz. There goes Pimarauda on Shaz. Paul Diver isn't quite close enough, but is Pimarauda going to send one up the inside of David Svat? No, he's not quite close enough. But he could still send one into the Vale chicane, you know. David Svat defends. As Paul Diver backs up the inside of Shaz. What is going on with these guys? They just keep swapping positions every race. There's more contact there. There's Paul Diver and Pimarauda. A slight little tap on the exit of the Vale chicane. OliX is also very close now to the back of Marco with 4 laps to go. But if Marco can just keep his composure, he can actually keep this P1 and could actually still end up coming out on top of this race as Shaz and Paul Diver side by side. Shaz round the outside of the loop. He gets ahead of Paul Diver. This is proper yo-yoing at its absolute finest, but it's so great to watch as Kiki getting very aggressively defended by Paul Diver, who really doesn't want the Racing Bulls to get ahead. As Pimarauda, I think, looking at the outside move of Luffield on David Svat. Paul Diver's looking at it at the inside of Copse. No, he's backed out of it. He's thinking better of it. Pimarauda goes off track though. Washes wide with understeer. That's going to allow Shaz back up the inside into Maggots, the 2 Williams. That was a little ambitious there from Shaz, and I always get nervous seeing a car getting overtaken into Maggots because it doesn't look like a corner you can overtake, but clearly you can. And again, he's just got no battery, so he's just going to get instantly overtaken again by his teammate. He's back up into P9, Pimarauda, and Paul Diver, is he going to send one on Shaz? Of course he is. He's done this move 3 laps in a row, Paul Diver, and he's still loving it, it looks like. If they're going to go side by side onto the next lap, Paul Diver round the outside. They're side by side down the main straight into Abbey. Paul Diver round the outside, he's off track. He has to concede the place to Shaz. My God, what is going on with these guys? Paul Diver loses the back end of the car a little bit, and he sent one up the inside of the loop on Shaz. Shaz gets a little bit twitchy. Paul Diver on the inside, there's contact! That was inevitable from so many laps ago. It's finally happened. And Shaz and Paul Diver make contact. I think Shaz squeezed him a little bit too much there, if I'm honest. I think Paul Diver was entitled to a little bit more space. I think that one's down on Shaz, if I'm completely honest with you, as OliX still not quite within reach of Marco. And then eventually Shaz squeezing out Paul Diver. As OliX actually takes the lead off of Marco on the penultimate lap. Could that actually be tactical there from Marco? Could he have done that deliberately to have overtake on the final lap? Because this race is going to go all the way to the checkered flag. This is not over. We've got OliX, Marco and Edward all in contention here to win this race. As Marco looks for it already on OliX. As they head through Maggots and Beckett's for the penultimate time. OliX with actually about similar battery level to Marco. Marco in boost mode though. OliX in straight mode. Like overtake mode, sorry. Into Stowe corner they go. Marco round the outside of Stowe corner. What an overtake there. Although I'm pretty sure OliX may have waited for the detection point of the overtake. He takes a little bit too much curb, I think, on the inside. As Marco rolls these 2 on to the final lap of this race, where we will decide who will be victorious here at Silverstone. Is it going to be 3 in a row for OliX, or is Marco and Edward finally going to get their first wins of the season? OliX up the inside. He's not quite able to get ahead of that Ferrari. As Marco now has to dump everything he's got on this final lap, surely, because he's going to get swallowed up by both Mercedes if he's not careful. And here comes the first attack from OliX. Into Brooklands they go. Marco still holding it there. on the inside into left field. Edward up the inside, little bit of contact there. I think that's alright. I think he tried to go into a gap that was disappearing. It's Marco choosing not to use his battery. He's got to keep everything he's got for the hangar straight. He cannot risk using his battery until the hangar straight. He has got more ERS now than OliX. If he can stay ahead on the hangar straight, I'm pretty certain Marco has won this race as they come now down the hangar straight. OliX isn't quite close enough. Edward's going to have a look on his teammate. That looks very aggressive there from OliX. I wonder if that's going to get reported by Edward. But that actually makes OliX wash out wide. That's just given Marco the win here as we look at these two fighting to see who can try and come out on top in second. But Marco, after taking pole, wins the British Grand Prix. OliX settles for second with Edward in P3, although I wonder if anything will be said about that defence. Smeggy and Tig from the back of the grid to P5 and P6 at the end. Tsunami in a bit of no man's land here in P7, who's actually fighting against Pingu's AI. Kiki getting caught by David Svat on the final lap will settle for P8. David Svat will be P9. Paul Diver will come home in 10th. Zedix 11th. Shaz 12th, who does get ahead of Pimaralda somehow. Wonder if something happened. Baban in no man's land of his own in 14th position. Where we have Ibrahim just coming out of Stowe, who's going to settle for 15th in this race. Nico will pick up the final points position though of P16 in the Red Bull, with the other Red Bull finishing up in P4. It's a valiant effort from Nico, who then bins it across the line. Steps on 20 lap old hard tyres. How the fuck did you get those at the end of the race? I'm not sure. And DJ Death Dragon whizzed finally across the line. Wow. And Nico gets P15 because I think Baban's his penalty.
Right, let's take another look at this incident between Edward and OliX on the last lap. Edward in the slipstream, and I think that's too late from OliX, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I think that's gonna get a penalty, if I'm honest. But then Edward coming back into the Vale chicane, that's a clean defence. And then Edward just cannot find a way past in time, but I think OliX moved far too late, especially on his own teammate.
Take a breather for a second. So yeah, congratulations on Marco for gaining the first Ferrari win and the first non-Mercedes driver. Could we have the Marco versus OliX title fight on? Or is this just a false dawn and OliX is going to come back even stronger next week when we head to the Netherlands? Only time will tell, I guess.